Well, good morning. I'm glad you can make it. Uh, everyone's here. So let's move on to the subject that I thought I would speak to today. And I started out with the belief that we as surveyors do not know very much about diurnal filtration. And what that is, you have one in your car, your truck, your vehicle. You don't have one on your riding lawnmower or your tractor. Or you have one in your any vessel, if it's in compliance, that's 2017 or newer. You don't have anything like it on a boat older than that, and many new boats still don't have diurnal filters. And what that is really the equivalent of the carbon canister that you have in your vehicle that filters out vent air from the fuel cell. That would be contaminated air, organically contaminated, fumed contaminated air, so it doesn't enter the atmosphere. In any case, in looking into the subject, generally that filter, which is about the size of your cell phone and an inch or so thick, is tucked up under a gunnel somewhere. So you'll never get to see it, but I am going to wager that everyone here has been on a smaller boat that has a mystery problem with at top end. And what we didn't think to do is, well, we checked the fuel, we checked the fuel filters, we checked the injectors, we checked, but no one thought to look under the gunnel to find out if the diurnal filter was clogged. And if that's clogged, when you get to a certain point, you can't steal enough air to let the engine run properly because the tank's going down gradually and causing a vacuum. So by the time you stop and correct it, it's sleeved enough air in to where the problem goes away. So another thing to think about. In any case, doing the research, it was easy to determine that California, being California, is way ahead of the game on emission control compared to the rest of us, or at least generally ahead of the game. And one of the things that they are have mandated, and I'll get to that in just a moment, the statutes, is that in real time, you won't be running an internal combustion engine of any type in the state of California as of 2028. And many of these rules come into effect 2024. How long ago was that from now? 15 months? So all those rules we love to flaunt because we're surveyors and like to write them down. Are we going to say in 2024, Mr. Boat Buyer, this is a great thing. I love your dinghy, but don't take the dinghy to California because you can't use it. Can't use the engine anyway, as of 2024. I think some of us would likely say, don't buy this little black boat, this cigarette, this loud, whatever it is, unmuffled vessel. You can't take it to California. It's simply too loud. We've all said that, I'm sure. Now we get to say, don't think about cruising the coast of California with this 15 horsepower engine rig because you can't use it. 2-cycle or 4-cycle. Boom, period, gone. So that's where this is going with the regulations that are going certainly to bleed down into Oregon and Washington State and wherever else there are issues or issues are perceived, likely real. So let's move on to what diurnal means, and that means daily. And as opposed to it's going on all the time as your fuel tank expands and contracts, breathes from temperature changes, those fumes are being emitted into the atmosphere. I think in here, California has something like 16 million small engines. That's the weed eater, it's the lawnmower, it's the compressor, it's whatever it is. And none of them are filtered. What this has to do with us, as I just stated, as emissions become more complex And there are surveyors probably, no, certainly in our organization, and IMS, SAMS, whatever, that are measuring the NOx output of exhaust stacks for commercial vessels. I'm not sure anybody is doing that as yet, but someday someone's going to ask us, did you measure the exhaust out? What did John Mahul say yesterday? His meter went off in a bag, zipped up, not in the exhaust flow. Someone's going to ask us, just like to ask us now, I don't know if you do it, but what's the decibel level at the helm of this boat? Well, if it's too loud, then you subjected little Johnny to hearing loss because the boat's too loud. This you have to mention it. It's there to be done. This emissions thing is going to be on us before we know it. We're going around with an exhaust probe, just like you do with your gas meter now, saying this engine is outside spec for carbon dioxide, sulfur, whatever. So it's going to get to us, and we know what we're talking about when we look at fuel systems. Everybody here looks at the fuel fill line. Does it have a dip in it? Does it? If we can, we read down what the specification of the tank is. If it's a fiberglass tank in a Bertram, for instance, we say you can't use this fiberglass tank because you're likely to put ethanol fuel in it and the tank will dissolve. We know that much about it. We know what MUIC says about it, and we can read them. But I'm not sure we're caught up on this emissions thing yet, and that's part of where I'm going. Quickly, by the way. So now we know what diurnal emissions are. And the emissions come from everything. And you'll see the hypocrisy in this in just a moment. It's the vent hose. We know that ABYC says a tight beat hose has a permeability rate of 3,000 parts per million per square yard, right? That's why we look at type A and type A1, A2, B1, B2. We make that note. And if you saw a B level hose going as a fuel delivery, whether it was gas or diesel, you would mention that because we are familiar with that, but we're not familiar with measuring the emissivity of those items. Are we? So we're not, but the meters are out there, as John clearly showed us, to be able to do that. Now, I am certain that the look on that broker's face when you say the hoses have got to be replaced because they're bleeding fumes, you're going to say, who made that rule up? Well, we didn't. But all we're doing is reading the rule. And this is what we're going to see in just a second. And those rules in California are very simple. And they'll get to us. And let's see here. I'm not very good at this, but I think I'm not good at it at all. There we are. Component rating for applicability. State of California, in advance of other states, has set their own state regulations concerning diurnal emissions. They had to be some individual with a purpose. And this does not deal with propane, butane, does not deal with hydrogen or ammonia yet, but certainly will. And it's gasoline, two cycle, 4 cycle, fuel injector, or carbureted. It doesn't matter. California Air Resource Board has officially stopped the sale, import, use, or manufacture of SOAR engines, small off-road engines. And that's an outboard motor. Right? So, and there's a wonderful little set of hypocrisy in here I'll get to in the end. The rule set will come into effect 2024 with a total ban of use by 2028. Right? That's what's going to happen. I take that back. That is not what's going to happen. That has what occurred. It's what's occurred. With the caveat, potential amendments as written will indicate additions and deletions for existing regulatory text. So the rules can go up. If they decide it needs to be 2026, they can amend that rule. That a quote from the stipulation clause in the bills. This reads, new requirements, new rules, new compliance. At this time, the rules are only applied to gasoline powered engines of less than 19 kW or about 26 horsepower. But we know that the gasoline, we already know that the gasoline engines that we're seeing in C-Rate 26, whatever it happens to be, built after 2018 have catalytic converters in the exhaust systems, right? We see that. I'm not sure anybody in this room, well, maybe Joel or user Linda can read that, what the emissions are from the oxy sensor on the catalytic converters on the manifolds of these engines. But if it's just as easy to say, not 26 horsepower, 360 horsepower. And then that surveying activity can take into effect, or has to take into effect, what the emission level is, so that the consumer is not in violation unknowingly. So 26 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot of 26 horsepower and less engines out there. Legislation will expand into gasoline engines of all sizes in all states. We have emission controls automobiles, except that's been normal. We live with that. Most of us have to take their car in every so often to have it checked for emissions. And it's a biannual event. We're used to that. It'll be our boats next. It takes a trucking to get it checked. All right. 2028 is just around the corner. Marine surveyors should be aware. Evaporative emission requirements to all components in the gasoline fuel systems of SOAR equipment except the fuel lines inside the tank. I don't know anybody who's ever taken a fill off to see what the fuel line inside the tanks look like. But stipulations and the requirements and legislation specifically exempt fuel lines in the tank, and for reasons we never will understand, it exempts snow blowers and ice augers. Now, I'm not sure how many ice augers there are in Southern California, probably not a lot, but they're exempt. The fuel fill cap. I equate this, many of us remember when OSHA, Occupational Health and Safety Administration, came out in the late 70s, early 60s with regulations for automotive shops. And one of those regulations stated that no air charge could be dismissed from a delivery system with a pressure of greater than 40 PSI. What they were trying to say is you can't use the hose to blow off your floor. What they effectively says is you can't inflate a tire. Because you can't inflate a truck tire with 40 PSI. So this is sort of in that way, because this means that vent hoses and fuel tanks, fuel caps, which now require a tether on the fuel cap on your weed eater, all right, have to have a physical or audible means of recognizing they're secure. All right. And I asked the question, does that mean you hand tighten it? No, there has to be some methodology to say it's hand tight, like a slip click or a snap that tells you it's locked down. I'm sure steel chainsaws love that rule, but that's what you've got to have. We speak to fuel cap permeability, but don't worry about the fuel tank in the storage, or fuel return lines. And that refers to the, you're familiar with the fuel return line on a diaphragm, a gasoline engine, it goes back to the carburetor, right? Should the diaphragm and the carburetor and the fuel pump fail. So that's exempt. The fuel return line is not covered. but the fuel lines definitely are. It says all components that are subject to evaporative organic gases into the atmosphere. That's pretty much everything. The new rules do not apply to compression ignition engines. So that would be any diesel. Compression ignition, CI. Compressed natural gas, propane, of which we see a lot of now. So that leaning on the back of that Ram X50 that wasn't legal in California with a 15 horsepower gasoline 204 engine is now legal with a propane 15 horsepower motor on the back. Liquefied LPG, liquefied natural gas engines are exempt at this time, except snow throwers and ice augers. Researching this, I don't suggest you do this, but if you wish to, sections 2750, 2771, Article 13 of the California Codes. If you ever can't sleep, pick up a copy of these regulations because you will nod off. Implementation of the new standards reflects reaction to an understanding that California has estimated 16 million small engines that use the evaporative emissions model limit or the hot soak diurnal emission rate are used among other factors to establish the standards. What hot soak means is the engine's been run and you let it rest and you measure how much it puts off while it's sleeping. The evaporative model emission limit is a rule that says how much you can put off while it's alive. All right, so this is what it's doing when it's running. This is what it's doing when it's not. The 2028 testing standard allows for 0.00. I guess that means you can have 0.001. The rule is no emissions at all. So that's it. So you're not going to be driving an electric truck or a Volvo or whatever it is. There's nothing with any emissions. So what is curious about this is they are very, very certain to stipulate you can't import parts that might repair that engine that might be in violation. You can't replace the engine with another engine that might be in violation. You can't advertise that you're going to fix anything that might be in violation. But what you can do is produce engines and components for export out of the state of California that are in violation. And you can't do it in our backyard, but you can sell something to the other guy. So that's where we are, coming to a shipyard in your hometown. It's here, gentlemen, ladies, it's upon us. And whether we like it or not, Maryland, New York, Massachusetts are going to have rules of this type and caliber shortly. The rest of the states will follow. Question. Silence. Oh.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What type of devices are you suggesting or talking that would direct surveyors like us to get certain devices for testing these things? Or should we just depend on industry manufacturers to build things to meet these regulations? How much of it comes back on the survey?
I think my opinion is that you knew that you knew there was not supposed to be 5 posts on a battery post because ABYC has told you that, right? You went to class, you got certified to do this, so you can't not know it, now that you know it. And I think that we, our group in Maryland, now know it, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to report it if we know this is a violation, why wouldn't you? Isn't that our job? You would certainly report a reverse polarity in a service outlet, right? You would certainly report a weakened bridge seat on the fly bridge of a sport fishing boat. You would sure report decay of a fuel tank in a commercial trawler. Why wouldn't you say, by the way, Mr. Boat owner, ship owner, charterer, insurer, broker, you know you're selling a boat that's in violation, or you're selling a product that's in violation. No, that going in. I mean, isn't that what we do?
That'd be a possible way for a potential buyer to get out of a contract.
Or yeah, he's getting into a contract he shouldn't be getting into anyway. Wouldn't you, when you went down and you took 5,000, right? And you was sniffing around, or whatever it happens to be, and it went off when you were in the cabin, wouldn't you say, well, this goes off, maybe this fuel detector is not working. You need to check this out. When you go down with your known hazardous gas meter, you report that exhaust leak. Now we need to report, I think we need to be aware that as those stipulations come to us, that we're obliged to say and have the equipment to monitor that particular condition. As part, I mean, yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about safety. We'll do that again today. But it's not just their safety, it's our safety. You go on a boat with, what did John say? 40% depletion in oxygen. If you take one breath, you'd have been dead before you hit the deck. That headache you got on the bridge might not be from the run the night before. Maybe, so now we have the ability to test it. Why wouldn't we do it? I'm sure nobody in this room does not test every outlet on every ship we go on. So that's it. So that's where we're going with this. I'm going to put something in a white paper that speaks to what type of instruments there are. No endorsement, just TIF makes this and Centec makes that and blah, blah. And what we do know is from experience, unfortunate experience, the all instruments are not created equal. And I'm boy with an anecdote in a couple of minutes. A few years ago, I became fully involved with doing third wire testing for outlets because dock shocks were becoming so prevalent. And what Ed Sherman, the guru of electricity for ABYC, and Dr. Sherman said, Ed, what instrument do you use? He said, you've got to have this Hyobi 4000. I got the name, 285, I think. Okay, fine. I'll buy one. So ordered one up, whatever it was, $375. And didn't look anything fancy. It's in the back of my truck right now. So while I was at Harbor Freight, and this reads in 10,000ths of a volt. RMS, root mean square, 10,000ths of a volt. Excellent, and good looking meter. Harbor Freight had a clamp meter for $15 and a clamp meter for about 37 to 38, $40. So I bought one of each. So I went out and took the world's greatest clamp meter, according to the world's greatest electrician, and clamped it on a wire, had a reading, took out the $15 unit, clamped on a wire. It was 1/10,000th of a volt difference. Put the second one on it, clamped on it, and read the same as a very expensive meter. Now, which one is right? They're only 1/10,000th of a volt apart, but they're hundreds and hundreds of dollars apart. So that's the type of comparison I hope to do. What works, what maybe doesn't. Oh, I think that's it. Are we good, Mike?
Yeah, good, James. I can't believe there's 16 million small engines. That's a lot of engines, a lot of boats. You're pretty much spot on time there, James. Well done. And I know Gary Goldstein is around and online. You just need to stop your share if you can for me, please. stop your screen share.
Let me get out of here. Stop share. Okay,
Fantastic. So, Gary, you should be good to share your screen.
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Good morning.